שלום לכולם, תודה רבה שהגעתם לעוד מפגש של הפלב. היום יש לנו, סרגי מבין קצת עברית, קצת, רק את הכללות. כבוד גדול בשבילי שסרגי מתארח אצלנו, אחד מהאנשים הכי חכמים באקוסיסטם, לא רק חכמים, גם טובי לב. סרגי עזר לי באופן אישי הרבה כשהתחלתי את בריז, גם להבין את האקוסיסטם, גם להבין את התרבות. אחד מהאנשים הבודדים שבנו עסק מצליח בביטקוין, אז אני ממש שמח שהוא איתנו. סרגי ידבר קצת. Sergej will give us a little bit of an overview about his company, Bitrefill, when he started Bitrefill in 2014. And grew it to a very successful Bitcoin, and not only Bitcoin business. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about what Sergey thinks about the Lightning Network, the future of Lightning Network, but also about the Bitcoin cultures. What are the pros and cons in Bitcoin culture, if you are willing to? Sure. Okay, go ahead. Thank you, Sergey.
All right. Thank you. Nice to be here, and thanks for inviting me, Roy. So yeah, I guess you kind of get the backstory, but we started Bitrefill more than 8 years ago now. At first, it was I mean the red thread has always been like, hey, you know, what kind of a money is it? Is it money? And if it's money, what can I buy with it? Right, and it's often, I guess, crowd here, not the biggest noobs, but if you remember your first impression of Bitcoin, you know, there's the decentralized internet currency, blah 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 blah. It's like, yeah, that sounds like a scam, right? Yeah, you know, then usually like, no, you can buy stuff with it. Okay, but what can I buy stuff? What can I buy? Right? And this conversation happens a lot in the world, and in many countries, unfortunately not in Israel right now, but in many countries, you can go on Bitrefill and buy something nice with like 3 clicks, pay with Bitcoin. You can buy a gift card for some e-commerce or for Uber or whatever. Yeah, by some research that we've made, is a significant chunk of things that people buy with Bitcoin that is not some kind of other crypto. A good chunk of that happens on Bitrefill. I guess we published some stats a while ago, but like we do sort of, Bitrefill alone does almost 3 times as many transactions a month as the whole BitPay network, for example, which is the largest payment processor. Because gift cards makes it easy. You know, we don't have to explain to every merchant what is a Bitcoin, how does it work. If you go into a store, you don't have to train every store clerk about how Bitcoin works and how to wait for confirmations or not wait for confirmations, and what's a stable coin and what's a Lightning, and all of these things, right? You just show them a gift card because you already paid on your phone, and then it's easy to go. Yeah, you know, we're on a quest, I guess, to make Bitcoin the money of the world. That's what's been driving us. Today the company is close to 70 people, working remotely all over the world. And so yeah, we're from the start big believers in Lightning. We're very early. Still think we're again like one of the largest real world things that people buy with Lightning. I guess tips and so on is much bigger, but in terms of like something tangible in the world that we live in, I think Bitrefill is the largest single entity. So yeah, and I guess originally Roy asked me to talk about like from the PlebTLV accelerator and sort of like advice to people building things in the space. And I think the biggest non-obvious advice, it sounds very obvious, but it's actually not, that has taken us unreasonably long to figure out, but nobody else has figured out, I think, better. So I guess there's that. But the biggest advice is like to really understand who the customer is going to be for what you're building, right? Because very often you say Bitcoiners and they hang on meetups and this and that, and they're like, we built this thing, and who's going to use it? Bitcoiners. No, there's no one definition of what a Bitcoiner is. And they're spread out over the world. They're very different group of people with different needs, wants, and so on. Many of them might not want to use whatever you're building for perfectly fine and reasonable reasons, right? And it's tricky, right? Because sometimes we approach this thing with an attitude of like, yeah, of course, of course people are going to want to use this thing. But very often it's not enough, because Bitcoin is this strange thing, it's the money is denominated in these decimal points or in this sats, and that's also has a lot of zeros and strange numbers, and the price goes up and down, and it's an investment, and people get all this stuff, right? And so to really drill down specifically, which group of people that you're building for, and how many of them are there, right? Because again, like, if you define a Bitcoiner, for example, I mean, a simple definition is like, well, somebody who might come to a meetup, or somebody that hangs out on Bitcoin Twitter, or consumes content about Bitcoin on the internet, right? Simple definition. I think many people here would agree, but like the vast majority of people that use Bitcoin are not in that camp, right? Most people that use Bitcoin, they just use it. It's an app on their phone. They searched for Bitcoin in the App Store. They installed the first wallet that came out. They did the thing that they wanted to do. Maybe they have some coins left, and that's that. They don't they don't spend their time thinking about it, arguing on the internet about some property of Bitcoin and some value or whatever, right? And on the contrary, there's also a lot of of the people that are in the camp that go to meetups, hang out on Twitter, and so on. There's also like a very broad variation of like what they want, what their desires are, and so on, right? I mean, if, for example, if you're Bitrefill, if you're a service that lets people buy stuff with Bitcoin, well, not everybody in the camp of the traditional definition of Bitcoiner will want to buy stuff with Bitcoin, because maybe they don't have so much Bitcoin and they're stacking sats. And if you're stacking sats, then sure, I mean, you should, but then it doesn't make sense that you're gonna want to buy stuff, right? And so then like these slices start happening, and if you keep slicing, you can often end up in a very small group of sort of like, and right now people are like laughing that to be a Bitcoiner you need to eat only meat, and you need to be, I guess, family values Christian, and all of these things, and then eventually you slice it down and there's like no one left. But I think that's the biggest lesson, and then also, I guess, being honest with yourself on whether or not you yourself are in the camp that would use the thing. And if you're not, okay, fair enough, but then you can't trust your instinct when you're building. You need to find someone who is in that camp and trust their instinct, right? Also many examples of like Westerners going to Africa, building stuff, or like banking the unbanked. And like, yeah, okay, but have you talked to someone unbanked? They're like, their needs are slightly different than what Bitcoiners imagine that they would be. And if you're not unbanked yourself, then you don't really know on a deep emotional level, like all of the different subtleties and things and so on. And so I think if I have one message, it's to like spend a lot of time figuring out and assessing what the user base is going to be for whatever thing it is that you're building. Because our industry is full with great things that nobody's using. Or very, very few people are using. And that this is the reason, sort of, because sometimes people just assume that, Bitcoiners, they're going to use it. But yeah, nobody knows what exactly is meant by a Bitcoiner, for example. Like, can a shitcoiner be a Bitcoiner? Let's not go into that point, as there's different views on these things. So yeah, I think that like, and we can talk around that, go deeper on that topic. I gave a talk a year ago on Pizza Day, where we kind of like sliced it down, like, for example, like, how do you sort of, how do you know? Like, there is, just very simply, and more than 100 million people have an account on Coinbase, right? 150 something, I don't remember the number, have an account on Binance. That's a lot, like hundreds of millions of people. Okay, how many people are on Bitcoin Twitter, for example? Yeah, you can kind of guesstimate, is it maybe, well, it's probably not a million, maybe it's 100,000, maybe it's 200,000, somewhere there, right? So there is like a couple of orders of magnitude. Who's that? who's the other 99,800,000 people that we don't see? And what do they do? And what drives them? Or what are their motivations? And what is their interest? And what they're trying to do? And so on. And I think that it's also, I guess, a question of visions, of, if is the goal, I'm just asking a question, everybody can think about it, but is the goal that everybody in the world, 8 billion people, should be a Bitcoiner according to your definition of a Bitcoiner? Identify with the values, participate, engage, run a node, all of these things. Is that the goal, and is that goal realistic? And if so, how do we get there? And if not, okay, then what is the goal? Personally, I don't know. Like, I've never seen any ideology reach the whole world, especially not a very spicy one like the Bitcoin ideology. The cypherpunks are a small group, and so I think, like, if we can make Bitcoin be something useful for many people, then that's pretty great, even if it's just an app. Right. I can give another example just to help you get out of this mindset that we often end up with as Bitcoiners. But who here has ever used a VPN? Okay. Who here has ever been to a conference about VPN? Okay, laughing. But why are you laughing? Because why the fuck would you go to a conference about VPN? Right? Guess what? Most people who use Bitcoin reason the same way about Bitcoin. Right? For the exact same reason. It's just an app on their phone. But that makes it hard to reach them. Right? You don't reach them by sponsoring the Bitcoin conference in Miami or in some other countries. You don't. Yeah, it's hard. They don't hang out in meetups. There's, I guess, a great turnout here, but like, in Israel, there's going to be hundreds of thousands of Bitcoiners. Most of them would not think about coming here to listen to a talk. And I think that's okay. Like, end of the day, that Bitcoin, it's both a thing, and it's also a ideological movement, and the thing and the movement overlap, right? But they don't overlap perfectly. You can be a very productive member of the movement without necessarily using the thing very often, and the other way around. You can use the thing very often without having any relationship with the movement, and I think that's also fine. And so, but figuring these things out, and this is just like the first couple of questions, then you kind of like really drill down, like which countries or which personality types, like what's the persona, what's the job to be done, like what's the person really trying to achieve? Like we were talking before about people who get paid for writing blog posts on Hive, and they want to buy something with their earnings. Okay, so that's pretty clear scenario. Somebody earns some coins on an internet platform. They're looking to buy something in the real world. Okay, we can kind of start seeing what that is, right? And yeah, personally, I think that sort of building things just for people that are in the movement it's tough. Like the things you build for people in the moment are kind of like the things that we see on the walls here, like cool swag, little paintings, T-shirts, and so on, that the people of the moment are all looking for. But for a lot of the other stuff, I think there's like a much bigger audience that can be hard to reach. And I think that, this is one of the big, things that's challenging Bitcoin these days as well, is figuring out how to relate to people that don't care as much about Bitcoin as the people who built the thing do. And then you can get into sort of all kinds of questions. But for example, I guess we can go into like the relationship with crypto. Yeah, right. There is this meme of like, Bitcoin, not crypto. Okay, sure. But let's divorce Bitcoin and crypto then. Who gets the kids, the stable coins? Well, the stable coins were made by the crypto people. Yeah, it's theirs. Yeah, I think pretty clearly. But a lot of people use stable coins. And if you, again, banking the unbanked, you talk to somebody in Africa and Latin America, and you present them Bitcoin and say, yeah, this is great, but also this thing is exactly like that, but how much money I have doesn't go up and down every day. Fair enough. And we can discuss, the trade-offs and all of that stuff around it, but still, there's a lot of people for whom that trade-off makes sense. They thought about it. They understand that, maybe the stablecoin can disappear one day. I might lose all of my money and so on. But I'll take that risk because it's very small, as opposed to a more significant risk with Bitcoin, which is like, it might go down 50% on a really bad week someday, and that's happened plenty of times. And so, it depends on, again, time preference and all of that. Like when you actually need your money. And then you kind of get into this. But should you do things that are Bitcoin only? Yeah, you can, but then you lock out the 99% of Bitcoin users that use other things. At the same time, you make yourself often incompatible with the things that people use. What's a Bitcoin wallet or what's a wallet that has Lightning and Tether and Tron? Exactly. And given that Lightning is the upcoming technology, sort of, then okay. But is there a wallet that has Bitcoin, Ethereum, Tether and Tron, USDC, Polygon, and so on? Yes. There's quite a few of those. And so is it strange that people that get paid in Bitcoin will choose a wallet like that has many of the options that they need? So that if somebody offers them to pay them in whatever the fuck, they can just be like, yeah, sure, no problem. But you can't do that if you're going to be Bitcoin only, right? And so in many cases, Lightning ends up sort of trying to build its own circular economy that like doesn't touch a lot of the other stuff. But then you're building something that's based on having excluded 90-something% of the users, which makes it hard. So yeah, I think that's like one of the bigger learnings that we've had from actually talking to customers and finding out what the drives, what their motivations are, and so like what things they use. A typical workshop exercise that seems to be seen as very controversial is to like open your phone, open the App Store, type in Bitcoin wallet in the App Store or in the Google Play Store, and observe the results that the AI of the good people of Google and Apple and so on has determined to be the most likely to be installed. and it's not a big conspiracy. They're not corrupted by anyone. This is what people install when they search for Bitcoin wallets. Yeah, and so this is what the reality is, and then we can try to change that in different ways. But it's important to be aware of what the reality is when you're building something for real people to use. And I think that like the biggest learnings that we've had are on that track. There's quite a few.
What did you do? So you understood that part of your learning, that you need to relate to broader market. What are the tangible steps that you do?
Yeah. So the question is like, what have we done with this learning in tangible steps that we've taken? A big thing I think has been to spend less time on Bitcoin conferences and on conferences in general. No, and on Twitter and so on. Because again, sort of if it's a group that represents 2% of your customers, and you spend all of your time and affection and so on, you keep getting distorted into that group in your understanding of the world. And it's fun, and we belong to that group as well, and we sort of want the approval of that group. Which makes it hard, right? We go to conference and we meet all of our friends. It's fun, but then again, that means that you're meeting not customers. And if you're meeting not customers, you might build something for not customers. And you should build. There will be, and there still are, slightly fewer. Also, we've done some Bitrefill parties at conferences that Bitcoiners don't like. We've done some at Ethereum conferences now, some other conferences, and getting to know some of the other communities out there. But that too, again, because the same way that I explained it about Bitcoin, the same applies to NFTs. Like the vast majority of people that have an NFT would probably not go to a conference about NFTs, and so on. So the same type of dynamic applies, and the big thing is sort of focusing on traditional marketing, and like very basic, like because we swim in this Bitcoin community, and we're surrounded by it, and we hire from it and so on. But that affects constantly affects the attitude. Whereas if you do like traditional marketing marketing concepts of like segmenting customers based on behavior and demographics and showing them ads, right? Or referral program. I mean, like basic simple stuff. But to try to get out of this sort of, if we get well respected in the community, then everything is going to solve itself. And that's just not the case. Like there's plenty of companies that are very well respected, have no traction at all. And so, and we like observed this like many years ago, and it was always strange that like we would post on Twitter, it's like, hey, does somebody have know a good translator for Georgian language? And like half an hour later, we have 5 really good leads. Yeah, always. And then we would like next week, it's like, hey, here's some gift cards in Georgia. Anybody wants to buy them? Yeah. Like literally, maybe one. Yeah, and that's always like strange. Like why? Like then we realized like, okay, there's a lot of people that like us. Yeah, they just don't have a need for what we do, right? And that's, for example, very symptomatic in the Lightning ecosystem. There's a lot of people that like Lightning. Yeah, they'll put the Lightning emoji in their handle, and they might run a node on an Umbrel. They'll have a Lightning wallet. They'll talk a lot about liquidity management and channel capacity and rebalancing and all of these things, right? But if you ask them, like, when did you yourself, open your Lightning wallet to pay something? They're like, I don't know, no, not lately, right? It's also like a fun exercise at conferences to like ask people like, which brand of wallet do you use? Just to kind of see the reaction. Because like for some people, it'd be like, they open, here's my Breeze wallet. I have my SaaS here, right? And there's other people like, I don't have a wallet on my phone. Yeah, I have I have a Ledger wallet at home. It's locked in 4 safes and so on, the multi-sig, so I cannot touch it no matter what I do. Okay, fair enough. But then that person is not going to be a customer for circular economy of Bitcoin services, for obvious reasons, right? So a lot of stuff like that, like, I mean, we changed our brand, for example. Recently I've been working with again like more traditional brand marketing exercises in terms of like making it cool to use Bitrefill in different ways, and like influencer marketing and so on. And like the most successful influencer marketing stuff that we've done is like people that are having fun in some correlation with the brand. So like you mentioned the Bitrefill parties, for example, but that's like, okay, that's the thing. Bitrefill parties is fun. It's a if you look at like lifestyle brand marketing, that's that. It's like people that have fun in some kind of connection with some kind of brand, and then it makes it seen as a little bit cool, and then people might want to use it. Another thing that we're thinking of now that we haven't really executed on yet, but is like to start doing, again, community management in the classical sense. So if you ignore like Bitcoin community and everything like that, if you're an e-commerce that sells aloe vera creams, like you would still do community management, right? You would have like a fan page, you would maybe have a newsletter, you would like talk to the people that might buy your aloe vera creams, you might recommend them some other products that they might be interested in. We might do partnership with other things that are related to that, and to try to build the community. You might find influencers, people who use a lot of aloe vera cream and that seem to have a fun lifestyle, and you can sort of like, hey, maybe you can plug ours and so on, right? Like that sort of thing, and like trying to build a community around that specific thing, as opposed to trying to steer the sort of pre-existing Bitcoin community, which first of all is like very hard to steer in a lot of ways, and then it's like you often end up being in tension with things, like like for us, okay, we're in tension with hodl and whatever, right? And we don't want to be in tension with that. I mean, if somebody wants to hodl, great, you should. Right, but we're not going to market to you. And let's be real with each other. Like, we can still be friends, we can still have a beer. But you have to understand that our marketing efforts are going to be towards people that might want to use the thing that we build, which again is very, very obvious. If you talk to a marketing person in the outside of the Bitcoin community, it's like, fair enough. Like you're explaining sort of first semester marketing school. There's nothing unusual here. But because we swim in this community, we often forget about these things, and then we often have like tension with things that are big and successful, right? I mean, Binance is like, nobody likes Binance. No, nobody likes, except for the 100 million people that use Binance. Except for them, nobody likes Binance. Why do people use? How do we make them stop? And so, yeah, like for me personally, I think that the Bitcoin ethos is like build the future the world that you would like to see. That's the Bitcoin ethos that I subscribed to some years back. So I don't like, and we were part of the whole like shaming companies to use SegWit 5 years ago, or 6 now, I guess. That was very popular. It's like, Coinbase, are you going to do SegWit, blah, blah. But like, is that the Bitcoin way, or do we just build things and try to get them to grow because of utility, not because of some kind of community social pressure from a group that the company in question might not even value that much? So yeah, stuff like that. Like I think the hardest challenge in everything related to Bitcoin in terms of building things that people use is marketing. And the people in this group are usually very technical, and among the technical, they're usually back-end leaning, right? I'm just stereotyping heavily here, but I think you kind of get the sense that there's more men than women in this group. For example, no, but like there's not so many, for example, artsy hipsters. We're in, I guess, southern-ish parts of Tel Aviv, but where's the hipster? Oh, they're not here. Okay, for example, right? So there's a certain type of people that gets attracted to Bitcoin, tend to be a little bit more towards the programming back-endy type, and the saying is that if your only tool is a hammer, then every problem is going to look like a nail. But there's a lot of problems in Bitcoin that are not back-end engineering problems. I think the biggest and most interesting problems are not back-end engineering problems. They are marketing problems, which makes it very hard. And to figure it out, you need marketing-minded people who like to talk to people and convince them to do stuff. Right, and I mean, I'm a back-end minded person myself. That's how I ended up here as well. And I love talking about complex technical things and HTLCs and PTLCs and blah 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 blah, and nerding down about different aspects of channel management and so on. But I also think that sort of the solution to get to success is to get the current, for example, Lightning, like the current version of Lightning, imperfect as it is, if we get it to be used by millions of people, the developers working it are going to be swamped with feedback in terms of which things to fix, and those things will be fixed, as opposed to building and fixing things before there is feedback, because you might fix the wrong things. A dirt road that gets traveled by many cars, it's going to even itself out just by the number of it, as opposed to sort of the genius in the basement building something. Sometimes it's successful, but very often it's something great that nobody uses. And again, we all know examples of projects in the Bitcoin space that are like that, and I think that's probably a wasted effort. But again, like that sort of persona, it's easy to start easy for them to start a backend project or like an engineering project, code something up, here's a prototype. I mean, that's even Satoshi did that as well, to be fair. Instead of like, let's talk to some potential customers. Let's try to spec down a customer persona and try to quantify of how many of them are there, and how are we going to communicate to them to explain to them that this thing exists. Like, that shit's hard. Right? Writing an algorithm is easier, I think. I think many here might agree. So there's a lot of, I think, learnings like that, and I think that in the past couple of years, like I've spent a lot, sort of less time, I guess, for example, bugging Roy with questions about the technical aspects of different channel management things, and spend instead talking more to like my marketing people of different kind to like figure out like how do we actually convince a shitload of people to use this stuff, and if they do and they complain, then we're gonna know which parts to fix, and it's gonna be great, because I think that what we have is already good enough to start heavily marketing it. We have a question?
And we're on. Yes, could you say something about the other side, the commercial realities of trying to line up deals where you can send the Bitcoin, or where we can send Bitcoin and you can give us tangible things in return, and also America. What's going on, and what do you think is likely to happen with America?
Yeah, that's a big question. I don't know. I'm not American. But since FTX and all of that, America's been causing problems. A lot of banks dealing with crypto have been shut down, some for kind of arbitrary reasons. And also there's like, it turns out that a lot of services were actually just offering services that fell back to those banks down the line in abstraction layers and so on. And so a lot of companies lost different kinds of banking rails. It's made it more difficult for us to pay our American suppliers. An interesting, I guess, detail that we're gonna tweet up at some point, but when we started doing that drive in terms of like figuring out new ways of sending US dollars to American companies, we actually convinced quite a few of our suppliers to accept payments from us in stable coins. And so today I think that number it's north of 30% of the gift cards that we sell, we actually paid for them in stable coins. So we actually have circular economy in stable coins in the sense that mainly USDT, but lesser extent USDC. So yeah, like we have more expenses in stable coins than we have income in stable coins, which is also pretty cool. And some years back, I guess it was also earlier, but also then at the time we tried to convince them to use Bitcoin, and that's tough, because then you need to convince legal, you need to convince the treasury, and how do you do the accounting, and what if the price of it goes up, and the stablecoin is, at least the price question is slightly easier, and so we're getting to the point now where actually you can do some chunk of your business in crypto, which is also pretty cool. I think there's also, I guess, a big question of like the sort of is stablecoins a good path forward, and or not, and so on. I guess we can discuss that if people are interested, but it's pretty clear that they are making a certain impact currently.
So what's the Bitcoin use cases that you see compared to the other crypto and stablecoins? What's like your customer, the 150 whatever million users that are Bitcoiners? Which segment is using the Bitcoin and why?
Well, that's a great question, and there's not one answer to this really. Even for us, like we have a lot of very different personas, and they overlap to some extent on some needs, but you have everything from I guess the simplest is someone who bought Bitcoin 10 years ago. They just have a lot of money in Bitcoin. Right? You could have somebody who gets paid a salary in Bitcoin or in stablecoins or in something else, right? Usually they don't care which it is, and so they'll have a little bit of whichever. People that are earning money trading, people that are gambling, people that are doing NFTs.
I guess my question is, like, when you applied the traditional marketing techniques on your user base, did you find like a vertical of Bitcoiners that you've managed to grow?
Yes. For example, we have a certain chunk of our users that are people that actually buy Bitcoin specifically with the purpose of shopping on Bitrefill. So I guess a simple example of that, simple funny example, but you can kind of generalize it if you think about it for a second. So if you're a 16-year-old kid in El Salvador, you play a game called Free Fire. I think every Bitcoiner should know about Free Fire. It's like a Fortnite type clone that plays well on low-end Androids. And it's very popular in El Salvador or some other countries. And in that game, you buy diamonds to get skins. And skins don't, weapons and stuff. They don't actually make the game better for you. It just looks cool. But the kids want to look cool in front of the other kids. And who are we to judge at the end of the day? We all do things to look cool. But if you're a kid in El Salvador and you want to buy some diamonds to get a cooler gun for your Free Fire, how do you achieve that? Like, you go on Google Play, but you don't have a credit card. Your parents might not have a credit card. Even if they do, maybe American Google Play is not going to accept your El Salvadorian credit card. Right? And so, okay, well, there is this Bitcoin ATM, or there is this Bitcoin company that has a referral program. I can just refer people to it and get a couple of dollars and do it many times, and I can buy diamonds, for example, right? And so we have, like, there's other examples of that. We should, like, where we internally talk about, like, people that use Bitcoin because it lets them do something that they couldn't otherwise do. Yeah, right. And this goes back to the VPN analogy a little bit, and I actually want to talk about that a little bit. This is my latest mental model. But so we talked about that, like, many people use VPN. Not so many go to conferences about VPN, even though I'm sure there are conferences about VPN, and like, I'm sure they have debates about different things and so on, and very heated. And there's the guys that they don't talk to anymore because of a debate they had 5 years ago and so on. Now, so VPN is a $44 billion per year industry, which is like this crazy number, and you kind of count backwards. Let's say that half of them is corporate something. Okay, that's 20 something billion a year, right? And so how much does VPN cost? $5 a month. Okay, $5 a month times 12 months, $60. 20 billion divided by 60 is like 200-300 million people pay for a VPN every month. Who are these people? Right? And what drives them? And like, among that group, there's gonna be some privacy maximalists and cypherpunks and whatever. But for the vast majority, they just, want to watch American Netflix, or they want to shop on a website in a country that doesn't allow them to shop there, right? Stuff like that, like doing something, using ChatGPT in Italy. Exactly. So yeah, but like doing something on the internet that you couldn't otherwise do, right? And that is something that historically has brought people to Bitcoin as well. I mean, the Silk Road Bitcoiners, but like, there's a lot of examples of people that came into Bitcoin because. So right, there's a lot of people found Bitcoin because it let them do something on the internet. Like, there's a lot of people that, for example, found Bitcoin because they were a kid, and kids are often unbanked. I guess less these days, but still. Yeah, or they, live in Bangladesh, which gets discriminated from PayPal for whatever reasons, but they still want to earn money online, and so using Bitcoin lets them do things on the internet that they couldn't otherwise do, right? But then from that perspective, like, well, stablecoins also lets them do things on the internet that they couldn't otherwise do, and so on. Yeah. Well, but that's a great question. I don't know. I think that. I mean, at the end of the day, in some ways, that's a really big question. I don't know. Like, for me personally, like, I prefer Bitcoin because it's trustless and decentralized and all of these things. But that's a meme. I agree. I mean, at the end of the day, the Satoshi story, it's just a meme. Doge is also a meme. We can discuss the quality of these memes, but it's just memes. At the same time, we do know that if there was no Bitcoin, there would be no stablecoins. Even if stablecoins don't use Bitcoin as a platform, we do know that in a world where Bitcoin did not exist, stablecoins was illegal, and people would go to jail for it. So in a lot of ways, I think that Bitcoin, with its higher decentralization and security, shields a lot of less secure things and allows them to continue existing. But that creates a very realistic risk, or some people might say that it's a good thing. I would prefer Bitcoin to win, but if you look at, for example, BitTorrent, BitTorrent became very popular and led to the Pirate Bay, all of that stuff, which led to the creation of Spotify and Netflix. We would probably not have had Spotify and Netflix if there wasn't BitTorrent, because the rights companies would not do the internet thing if they weren't forced to by the competition for privacy. And so today, most people don't use BitTorrent. They use Spotify and Netflix because it's okay to pay $10 a month and you have good service and click and it works and whatever. I think that there is a realistic risk that this sort of thing can happen with stable coins and other things that are less secure, less decentralized, becoming what most people actually use, while Bitcoin remains this sort of very hardcore, ultra secure sort of Fort Knox of things that is hard for people to use. Me personally, I would prefer that not to happen.
I saw the tweet from Matt the other day. Even in your segmentation currently, after you added a lot of stable coins and other payment methods in Bitrefill, Bitcoin is still dominant.
Yeah, of course. Or what's the question?
The question is like, what's the like if it's
why
if stable coins are better because people don't care, and there's no volatility in the price and stuff like that. So why use Bitcoin? And still, we see a lot of people using Bitcoin.
Yeah, well, I mean, so a lot of people don't care about the volatility. Some people like the volatility, right? Because it's an investment. You might become rich or richer or whatever. So it's not just that the volatility thing is just a bug. It's also a feature. At the end of the day, Bitcoin has been around for a long time. It has the biggest network effects still, and people use it. But then again, sort of, this is also part of like the challenges for Lightning, is that Lightning does not have the same network effects, because you can't open a 10 years old Bitcoin wallet and just send over Lightning. You need to have a new wallet, right? And so then it's a new thing. And on top of that, there's like a new model of how you interact with it. It's not an address anymore. There's all of these other things, right? You have to make an invoice, you have to be interactive, you need to have channels and routing and this, that, and the other. So that makes it tough, because the Bitcoin that has network effects is, the 2015 Bitcoin. And people are like upset, like, why are the most used wallets the same ones that were the most used 2015? Like, fuck, it's been 8 years, we tried really hard, we built things, we blood, sweat, and tears, and people are still using, blockchain.com all these years later. But like, that's some part of the whole network effect thing, is that it's been around for a long time. People trust it in the literal sense, because it's been around for a long time and so on. And we all know somebody who used it 5 years ago and it didn't explode yet, so I guess you can trust it and so on. So that's what makes why Bitcoin is hard to upgrade, let's say. Like simple stuff, like, we still, like, now we're discussing, should we change our default addresses to BC1 addresses? It's been 6 years now. And most wallets support it, but is it 95%? Is it 98%? 99%? 99.9%? It's hard to know, right? And you don't usually know sort of how much volume gets missed. Like we did make that change once, like 3 years ago and so on, and nobody complained. And then we looked at the logs, and it was like big dip in certain wallets or the countries and so on, and then we switched back and it came right back up. So like, there was a lot of people that were just like, doesn't work, okay, I'll do something else, because again, it's just a thing. If your VPN doesn't work for whatever reason, it gives you an error that you don't understand on technical language, what do? You get another VPN. You don't necessarily engage with customer service of some company trying to, like, some people do, but like most people don't.
Do you have some stats to share with us about the volume in general and Bitcoin specifically, Lightning specifically?
Well, we can go through that thread, I guess. I think that's the best stats that I have, or if you have some specific question or...
Which country is the most maximally? Like,
what's okay, but how...
Is it not only saving in Bitcoin, but also spending the Bitcoin? No, it's not my definition.
No, but like, how would we see that in the stats? Let's say, help me, like ChatGPT. How should I understand the question? What's the format of answer you're looking for?
In which country, proportionally to their size, there are the most people buying things with Bitcoin versus stablecoins?
I think El Salvador. Yeah, I think it's El Salvador. There might be others as well. Yeah. I mean, Bitcoin is so global, and there's so many different people in different parts of the world using Bitcoin, and all of these ways that we can't even imagine or understand, really. And it's hard, and we only see, it depends, and like, for example, we don't have a lot of products in Israel. There's a lot of people use Bitcoin in Israel. We don't see them. Yeah, right. So I couldn't answer Israel, but maybe it is Israel. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, 90% even. Yeah, I mean, I mean, my attitude to maximalism then was a very pragmatic one. It's like, well, show me the traction. We had this. We were joking about, like, we don't take meetings with any project unless they have more transactions than Dogecoin. Right, and that is still a decent benchmark, but quite a few do these days, right? And so you have things like Polygon or just basic Ethereum. Back then, like, people weren't actually using it to buy stuff, for example. Today they are, and they're using Ethereum. They're using stablecoins on Ethereum, and you can kind of see why and how that would work for them and so on. And it's also, by the way, a very worthwhile endeavor to, like, delve into that ecosystem of, like, what it looks like, what are the things that they use, what are the different sort of, what does an Ethereum do? Typically, and again, there's many different types and different motivations and so on, but, like, to get to see what the wallets look like, what the user experiences and so on look like, and you learn a lot of things. Like, I've learned that MetaMask is the largest crypto wallet in the world by users, and it doesn't even support Bitcoin. Okay, how is that? How does it work? And so on. Well, if you're doing Ethereum stuff, like, what's Ethereum stuff? You're going to trade NFTs. How do you do that? With your MetaMask wallet. You're going to do yield on some protocol. How do you do that? With your MetaMask wallet, right? Okay, compare that in Bitcoin. Like, what do? You hodl on multi-sig of 3 hardware wallets. Okay, fair enough. How are you going to buy something online with 3 hardware wallets? You're not. Right? What's a common mobile wallet that Bitcoiners, that the people use with Bitcoin? Yeah, well, it's going to be, like a blockchain.com, Exodus type wallet. It's not your blue wallet, green wallet, and so on. And why is that? And what does that say about the demographics of people that are making transactions with Bitcoin? But I guess I digress a little bit. But it's also, I guess, a question of vision. Like, is somebody who is using MetaMask, is that an enemy? Or is that a potential friend in the future? Like, are we trying to convert people to our thing, or are we trying to isolate from the other things?
Another slightly personal and question, and you can choose not to answer if you don't want. Your name, Sergey, you are originally from Russia, I'm guessing?
Soviet Union, yeah.
What?
Soviet Union.
Yeah. So what do you think about what's happening in the world, how Russia was cut from the banks of the world, and how it affects you, maybe your family, maybe your age group?
Me, it doesn't affect at all. I mean, I don't know. That's a big question of that money is being used as a political weapon, and even though I kind of agree with the cause in this case, I don't know. It's tough. It is what it is. I think in terms of like countries getting cut off recently, like that's not my biggest concern. I'm more concerned about Venezuela, Cuba, places like that that are also being right now targeted by the American thing that you should not, do anything there. Whereas, like, even from an American standpoint, some kid in Cuba bought some phone refills with some Bitcoin. Is that a big problem? On the other hand, if some kid in Russia did it, is that a big problem? I don't know. It's a tough question. I think probably deep down, I don't think that we should. I mean, obviously, I think if everyone's Bitcoiner, you kind of think that you should be able to use money freely, and that money shouldn't be used as a political tool. So I think deep down, that's my view.
I also have a question. So was there any event that you remember in the last year, 2 years, that affected Bitrefill a lot, like peak in users or peak in transactions in Bitrefill, caused by a specific event?
Yeah, Chivo, Strike, but I mean, this happen every once in a while. I think, one stat that we've seen is that, for example, when fees go up, we see people use Bitcoin like other chains. Let's say, so your Litecoins and Dogecoins and Dash and so on, more. Also Lightning, more. So, and that was kind of cool to actually see. I didn't think that was the case actually, but it seems that stats are showing that. And so the question of how that happens. Well, many people keep their Bitcoin on an exchange, right? And if sending Bitcoin costs you $10, but you can for $3 convert to Litecoin and send Litecoin instead, then people do that. Specific events, again, it's tough because the way that Bitrefill works, it's spread across so many different countries and use cases and coins and whatever, that it makes it hard to see one thing causing a really big dent. I mean, when there was fear about USDC a month ago and we turned it off, and our USDC sales went to zero suddenly, right? And for a while we did some chain investigation in Ethereum, and we saw that there were some people that had algorithmically traded their USDC at like 2 USDT, not with us, on some DEX type thing, for like they got 90 cents of USDT for $1 of USDC, and then they spent that USDT with Bitrefill, for example. So we saw some stuff like that, and we see a lot of there's a lot of these interesting stories that. But it's, again, you see that on Twitter as well. You can kind of imagine that it would happen, and it does happen. I don't know if I have a better answer.
I have a question about what do you think about CBDC, if this has changed rules in
That's
crypto?
a great question. So I don't know. I don't know why Bitcoiners are so upset about CBDCs. I've never had a good argument for why it would be a problem in any way. So I don't know. Maybe I don't understand it, but the way I see it is that CBDCs are going to be good for Bitcoin and good for freedom in the world. I mean, fundamentally, the biggest problem for Bitcoin right now is that it's hard to interact with the legacy system. right? Because you need to have a bank to buy Bitcoin, or if you sell Bitcoin, you need to get it to some kind of bank. This is also why, for example, Bitrefill exists. And banks are private companies, but very heavily regulated. They're like semi-state, semi-private, this weird situation. But a private company can deny service to anybody, right? You go to the falafel place, it takes too long time to order. They say no falafel for you. Go away. They don't have to motivate. It's a private business. But the government can't do that, right? The government, either you follow the law, and in that case, you're welcome, right? It's not like the tax agency of any country is going to be like, we don't like you, you can't pay tax, right? I mean, so CBDCs are going to be great for buying Bitcoin, I think, because they can't stop it unless Bitcoin is illegal. But at the very least case, it's going to be easier to buy Bitcoin with a CBDC than it is today with a bank account. Other than that, I think that, I've been following the Swedish CBDC project since 2014. It's been 8 years that I've followed it. And I actually met with them in 2014-13, and they were researching heavily into this cryptocurrency then world, which then became blockchain, which then became distributed ledger and so on. And today they are researching very heavily, and they're building prototypes and paying consultancy firms and releasing white papers and making press releases. But is there? No. And I think fundamentally, I think it's going to be hard to make for like a Western type democracy country to have a CBDC, because fundamentally they can't answer this very important question, which is, so can I anonymously download an app and receive some CBDC on my wallet without registering for an account? Right? They can't answer that question, because if they say, yes, you can, it's like cash, then it goes, but what if the bad guys use it, right? And then, no, but we're going to have to make sure to prevent money laundering. Okay, we're going to prevent money laundering. But we're going to have KYC. Okay, but so you invented banks. But we already have banks. So what are you adding to it? Some blockchain magic, okay. But fundamentally, we already have banks. Maybe citizens will be able to have an account with the central bank of their country. Maybe, why not? Probably great, I guess, from the fiat paradigm. Because again, the central bank can't refuse service to somebody because they don't like them or something that they do. Okay. Dispute there, but it's harder, at least, for the government to deny service to somebody. You can sue them. So I don't know. Like maybe I can ask a question of like, who has the best explanation for why Bitcoiners should be concerned about CBDCs? What about it? Sure, dystopian as fuck. But like, but sure, we're in agreement about that. But how does that? Like how does that? Like I would agree with you that that's not great. But first of all, that's China. That's like not Western democracy. Right. Right. So cashless society, the government can prevent, censor, prevent you from doing stuff. But we have that today. We actually have one step more than that, because the government can act via private companies that don't have to explain why they're censoring you.
Not when you have cash.
Not
like when you have actual cash.
Sure. So the war on cash, but that's orthogonal to CBDCs. I mean, the war on cash, we're like, yeah, sure, that's a problem. But we have the war on cash everywhere and we don't have any CBDCs. It's going to be used as an excuse to kill cash. Right.
Because they need the they need the velocity of money to increase.
Right. So from the Bitcoiner standpoint, then CBDCs will be used as an excuse to ban cash and also Bitcoin. Right. Right.
That's how they also implement UBI, so forth and so forth.
Sure,
You can go through the whole conspiracy curve if you want, but
No, I'm with you, I guess. But then the problem is the banning of cash. Like,
yeah, and the Swiss are trying to pass a law that says that cash is a human right, right? So,
right, for example.
Yes.
So it's going in other directions. I mean, so for example, like again, like I followed in the Swedish CBDC project, and from like the central bank's standpoint, at least what they say, but like I perceive them to be relatively honest, is that they see that the cashless society has put too much power with the banks and not with the central bank. And the central bank controls cash, and the banks control digital money and credit cards and so on. And so they want to issue CBDC to actually wrestle some money from the banks. So in a lot of ways, like that would be that they're on our side.
Exactly. This is the antithesis to Bitcoin. It's the opposite. You're going the opposite direction from decentralization.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, I'm with you in that. Like, it's not
very
desirable for me.
You said a Bitcoiner should be happy about CBDCs. I disagree.
Yeah, fair enough. I guess maybe that was too strong to say that we should be happy about it. We're saying that there are probably certain benefits for Bitcoin from CBDCs. Like, again, for example, that it is going to be harder to just randomly deny service to somebody using CBDCs. Huh?
I actually think the exact opposite. Like, I think it would be actually, because you're centralizing the control, you're going to even make it much more easier for somebody at the top to push a button.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it comes down
prevent you from buying a train ticket because you spat on the floor or smoked in the wrong place. So
right.
Right, we're not going to go through the conspiracy curve. I'm just saying, like, those, but we know that that's happening in China.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. That's I guess. I guess yeah. The question is sort of like I think what Nadav said is that like if it is being used to actively ban cash and Bitcoin, then that would be problematic. I guess. On the other hand, we've built Bitcoin to kind of to resist the state level attack and so on. And so in some ways,
Bitcoin is the antithesis to the CBDC path.
So maybe it's a natural step in the evolution of it that the state attack is happening.
Then they fight you.
Yeah, maybe.
So concerning the possibility that CBDCs might certainly roll out at some point, do you think that if so, can they coexist with cash or no?
Again, this is beyond my area of expertise.
Your views. Though.
I mean, I don't know why my views would be interesting in this, to be honest. I think it could. I mean, like fundamentally, again, like you could. I think from a government perspective, like why cash hasn't already been banned is like, yeah, well, like old people. Like really, I think that's the biggest reason. And CBDC doesn't really fix anything for old people. It actually makes things worse for old people. Because
how about poor people?
Yeah, well, it depends on whether or not the poor people are excluded from the CBDC or not, right? The poor people are excluded from banking. So, and I think that the intention is to include them to a larger extent. In practice, I think it's going to be hard to do. And so in the end, I have a hard time seeing CBDCs being something that is successful and useful for someone, because then you have to start like, again, like who would use a CBDC? Like it's the same question that we just discussed, like who's going to use Bitcoin, right? Who's going to use a CBDC? Well, like, yeah, but I already have my credit card. Okay, why should I use a CBDC? Yeah, there's no clear reason. And then you have like, okay, but the financially excluded people are going to use the CBDC. But then there's going to be problems and the government has to deal with it and so on. So I don't know. Like, I think that in terms of like using the CBDC to ban cash, you can't do that on day one of CBDC. You can do that, when everybody's using the CBDC all the time. Well, maybe then you can sort of use that to bank cash. And on the other hand, I think that we're already on that trajectory with banks and credit cards, and it's probably just a matter of time. I mean, in Sweden, I was telling someone, like, a lot of people don't know what the cash looks like. You can scam a Swedish person by giving them fake Swedish kronor, and your success rate is going to be really high because they don't know what it feels like. They know the old ones that they had as a kid, but they changed it, and now they don't know. Because very few people use cash. So you can have the cashless dystopia even without the CBDC, sort of. Like, I guess what was said has already been said.
So thank you. And one more question. If you have like a vision of people using Bitcoin for the purchase of goods and services, if Bitcoin is a disinflationary asset or some of that sort, why would a Bitcoiner want to spend his Bitcoins on anything?
Because he has to eat, otherwise he'll die.
So if I have an alternative to that,
right,
like cash,
why should you have an alternative?
because I do have it right now.
Yeah, you do. But
So why? My question is, why would a Bitcoiner use his Bitcoins to live? Like,
yeah, well, I mean, yeah, sure, but that's the thing. I mean, it depends on where you're starting as well.
I'm just speaking about the comparison of Bitcoin to fiat money as a disinflationary.
Sure, but I mean, it depends. If your salary is in Bitcoin, then maybe you're gonna spend Bitcoin. If your income is in Bitcoin, and there quite a lot of people are like that. Like, I mean, we live today in a world where more and more people produce information. And that's all they do. All day they go to work, they produce information. Information doesn't have borders. People discover that, you know what, I can sit here and produce information for a company that's over there. And maybe I can get paid more money by doing that. And then it's a hassle for that company to pay me, because I'm in Ghana, and it's freaking hard for an American company to pay you in Ghana, but they can send you some Bitcoin or some stable coins or whatever. And suddenly you have these Bitcoins. Okay, what do you do? My bank gives me grief for using crypto because they think I'm a terrorist. Okay, fair enough. So then you have, for example, right? So there's a lot of scenarios like that, and where people would use Bitcoin, and also you kind of also explained why a lot of people who are Bitcoiners would also not use Bitcoin, right? And that's also the thing. It's like, very many people reason like what you describe, and it makes sense for them, and that's great. And I don't have any disagreement. But like, again, like, you should market. Then the question is like, but why aren't they using Lightning? Well, they're not using Lightning, not because of a problem with Lightning, but because they're not using Bitcoin. Or they're holding Bitcoin in a cold storage somewhere, which is also great, and you should do that. But then they're not going to be users of this Lightning service, probably.
So specifically regarding Lightning, you offer rewards to Lightning users, right?
No, not anymore.
Not anymore?
It's the same.
So you tried it and it failed?
It doesn't make any difference. I mean, Bitcoin users don't care about rewards.
No, but you as a commercial company, you offer the reward. There's a reason for you for offering the reward in the first place, right?
I mean, the reasons are always, marketing, retention, and so on. But the rewards don't do anything. It's just giving money away. Fundamentally,
there's an entire credit card system in the States that works based on like which card gives you better reward.
Yeah, but that's a different world. Though that money is coming from the merchants. And so the credit card system is kind of a 3-point scam, right? Where the credit card company engages the user to extract money from the merchants, right? And so like when you blip your Amex instead of your local bank card, you get 1% reward, and the poor merchant that sold you the falafel pays 3%. Amex keeps 2%, and everyone's happy except for the merchants.
But you can.
But we don't have that in Bitcoin.
But you can apply the same paradigm to Bitcoin as well. For merchant, in order to encourage users to spend their Bitcoin, they can offer them rewards.
You could, but again, it like we have rewards on some products and so on. But fundamentally, I think sure, but those are not companies for Bitcoin users. They're companies for Bitcoiners, which is different. They're I mean, like, to paraphrase, their slogan is "Live on fiat, get some sats back," right? Our slogan is "Live on Bitcoin," and there's a very big difference and a very small overlap between our customers and theirs. Even though, like, from a technical standpoint, well, now Fold has changed a lot, but like some years ago, like, technically we're very similar. But like in terms of user base, very different. Like a Fold customer, you know, they. I mean, they would be more like what you described. It's like, you know, I have my fiat card, get 1% sats, and it feels good. I have more sats, and I'm stacking them. One day I'm going to be whole coiner, and so on. Versus a Bitrefill user is somebody who's like, okay, I have my income in Bitcoin. What can I do with it? And that's a very different attitude. And in terms of this reward stuff, there are some user groups that do care about rewards, but it's not sort of what people think. It's more obscure sort of like if you're you know, buying a lot, then maybe it makes, or if you're reselling something and so on, like you're buying e-commerce from a different country and then you're reselling it locally, then every percent matters to you, and so they care about rewards, but they don't know what sats are, for example. So like, low margin. Yeah, for those groups, but for the bulk of crypto users, it's not that margin sensitive an audience. People care about if they feel that they're being ripped off. So they care more about that than they actually care, right? Because I mean, we all spend sats on all kinds of random useless things, right? We all like, you can feed a chicken, that's sats. Why not, right? I mean, it's not that like Bitcoiners as a group are not actually that sensitive. And probably most people don't do the mental calculation even of like how much money they actually send to those chickens. Was it 1 cent or 10 cents or $1? It's like, whatever, it's just sats. I guess another interesting question is, who here can answer without doing math in your head on our system? How many sats are in $1? Who knows? Raise a hand. Without doing math. Just ballpark. Some people do, but a lot of people don't, right? And so that's also like an interesting. I guess another interesting learning we've learned is that like users don't know what sats are. Like they think it's an altcoin. So we're sort of we're removing the word sats from the website. It's like, what is that? It's, for example, that was like unexpected from spending a lot of time in the Bitcoin community, where it's like sats the standard, like nowhere near the standard. In a certain group, it is, right? And it is loud and influential. Per capita is very influential. But it's still a relatively small group, whereas for most people, they know what Bitcoin is. I mean, a lot of people don't know what Lightning is, right? I mean, we're working with that issue now for El Salvador, which is also tricky for like unifying the on-chain and Lightning payments into one, which is technically very easy to do, but then you have the really complex QR code, which you can't scan with a crappy Android phone, so you have to fuck around with that stuff to try to figure it out. But like a typical El Salvador person, oftentimes we've seen that they pay on-chain because on-chain is called Bitcoin and the other one is called Bitcoin Lightning, and they don't know what that is, but they know what Bitcoin is and they click that, for example. Which I guess also like it makes sense once you know it, but it wasn't intuitive before from the Bitcoin community member standpoint, because of course everybody knows what Lightning is. But then that doesn't answer, like it creates a lot of other sort of strange questions. Like, I mean, for example, like we've had consistently like Litecoin is doing slightly more volume than Lightning, been since always. And so the question, who the hell is using Litecoin, right? Who are these people? Like, well, this is strange. We all know like lots of people using Lightning. You just show up to the Bitcoin embassy in any city, and you're gonna meet a lot of people who use Lightning. You never meet someone using Litecoin. There's no Litecoin conferences. There's no Litecoin magazine, right? There's no Litecoin maximalists, and so on and such forth. And yet, people are using it. Probably many of them, again, it's just a thing. They don't love it. Well, it's light. I mean, it's the same as Bitcoin but lower fees, which is sharding. Huh? Yeah. So, but I mean, that's the same for Lightning as well. I mean, many are exchange users or custodial service users or whatever. But that's so, and that's just the sharding strategy, which is what they do in Ethereum land, where you have Ethereum and you have Polygon, you have BSC and you have Tron and like all of these like basically big block Ethereums, and then when it gets full, they create a new one and it gets a name, and then they go with that, and it seems to be working for them this far. But like we have that in Bitcoin land as well. Like we have Litecoin, for example, and some of the others. But yeah, I think Litecoin is the winner of the big block coins.
I'm not sure where Bitrefill is located, but I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your relationship as a company with like traditional banks, and how or whether it's been impacted at all by what's happening in the States with Operation Chokepoint 2.0.
Right. Yeah, sure. So I guess I'll repeat. I think your microphone wasn't working. The question is like what our relationships is with banks and how we were affected by FTX and the choke point. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like I said before, like we do pay. When we sell gift cards, so we buy those gift cards from gift card wholesaling companies that we pay in regular fiat money. Whatever money is appropriate in that country. And so we use banks and banking type services and so on. And yeah, some of them lost access to USD, for example, as part of that, because I guess somewhere down the chain they were using Silvergate or something. So it did become more difficult for us. Didn't stop our service in any way. But I mean, when you're working in our field, I think like normal people don't understand, but like getting bank accounts is part of the job description for someone in your company. And it never ends. You always need to have bank accounts. You always need to have a backup and a backup. And they should also be independent from each other. Right, because sometimes you can find out that you got this bank account, but actually writes in that one. And it's like you have two of the same. You need to have redundancy. And yeah, they can get shut down for all kinds of reasons, sometimes very arbitrary. I mean, I don't have any special knowledge about the choke point stuff, but other than what we can observe. And yeah, I guess I was saying before is that we did successfully convince some of our suppliers to actually take payment in stable coins, which actually makes life a lot easier in a lot of ways. Because if you think of it, I mean, for example, like with what we call the present of banking, like, hey, we need to send money to an American gift card company. Well, if you do it on a Friday afternoon, then probably it's not going to arrive until Monday, and we're going to have people shopping on Sunday. They might get an error because there's no, we can't make them a gift card. Because we run out of funds, right? So we need to keep afloat. Whereas with stable coins, we get credited right away, and we can even automate that so that it always sort of refills itself, and then even automate part of our treasury cash management that we have. So there's a lot of like benefits that are coming out of this stuff. And I actually also think that the stablecoin thing, I mean, there is a decent scenario in which the stablecoins get banned. again, I don't have any special insight into whether or not that's likely or not. Yeah, but if it does, then they did teach a lot of people the value and benefit of having money in a wallet, paying by signing a transaction, to an address, scanning a QR code, all of these things. And what are those people going to do? Well, they're going to go to the more secure option. So that's good. But yeah, again, like for me, I would have rather that we popularized, I still would much rather that we focus on popularizing the really solid one.
What percent of your of the Bitrefill team is based in emerging markets versus developed markets, and have this part of how these team members helped you sort of like sniff out the bullshit versus the real ecosystem or economy, say, of like Bitcoin or
of course.
And then
yeah, I don't know. I mean, what's an emerging country? It's like a philosophical. Is Argentina an emerging? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe half, something like that. I don't know. We usually hire people based on skill, and sort of we do discriminate against the really bad time zones. But other than that, we get people just based on getting the best people, and then it just so happens that they distribute somewhat randomly over the world. But yeah, absolutely. Like we obviously have team members that, if you happen to be in Canada, then well, congrats. You're also in charge of making sure that our Canada storefront is tuned for Canada and vice versa. Otherwise it would be very hard.
And then the follow-up is, because oftentimes, you're Argentina, Venezuela, and, the narrative is that there's a lot of users there, but, you go there, and it's actually, lower than Europe. So that was sort of like my question, if you discovered that, and then continue from that, you asked about selling Bitcoin, and so, I don't know. Top. So following up from exactly working in these emerging markets and what the demand is, I've been working a bit on Rootstock. I don't know if you're familiar, and so I was curious how do you decide which payment methods do you accept? How do you add Litecoin? You asked, why would I sell my Bitcoin? I'm asking about Rootstock in particular.
Yeah.
In Argentina, it has some popularity, and now there's options being developed like the sovereign dollar, which, for example, if someone in Argentina wants to use, not to sell their Bitcoin, but to borrow against it. So it's kind of like two questions into one, if you're seeing demand for that, and if there's an actual Bitcoin economy ecosystem that you're seeing in the global south, or if it's just narrative and it's less than in Europe.
Well, I mean, to answer the last question first, absolutely. The narratives in reality differ widely in every country, south or north or whatever. There's always a big difference. At the same time, again, I don't think that Binance and Coinbase lie about their user numbers, but and it's hard. It's really freaking hard because everything that's written in press is someone's press release, and telling a story and so on. So yeah, I mean, again, the hard problem is the marketing problem, and that's part of the marketing problem is figuring out what the market actually is that you're marketing to. In terms of, sorry, I forgot the first question. Yeah, right. So how do we decide which coins to add? I mean, I think we have two main metrics. One is like customer requests, and we do some human intelligence processing on them to see if they're part of an AstroTurf or not. And then we look at what's the activity on a given chain, how many active addresses, how many payments per day, things like that. Like I was saying, we had this Dogecoin rule that was like, hey, if your coin has fewer payments per day than Dogecoin, then I'm sorry. I think fundamentally for us, like we're not going to support all of the payment methods. It's just too much work, both on the not just on the tech side, also like on the operations side. We need to receive those coins, we need to sell them, and treasury wallets. It's a whole thing. And fundamentally, I think that most people that use, especially like one of the lesser used coins, know how to exchange it into something that is more used. And so when we see that like a large chunk of people are doing that exchange, well, then maybe we go directly to the source. But obviously there's a little bit more considerations than that, and decisions are made a little bit on an ad hoc basis. When we integrated Lightning, there were no users of Lightning, for example. So sometimes we do leap of faith stuff. But usually we look at transactional activity and sort of, we don't want to be the only ones on that chain. We're not that influential. We can't make a difference in a coin that few people are using. But then, it's also figuring out who are the people that are using it, what are they using it for, and so on, right? And sometimes people like, but you did this thing 5 years ago, why you should, that means you should also do that thing today. It's like, well, not if the thing 5 years ago was a mistake. Right? So yeah, I think that's kind of like, like we added Dash a long time ago. I guess we bought into some of the stuff that they were doing. They were giving away a lot of money as well to people in Venezuela, some countries like that, and we found it to be interesting. And technically, it's the same as Bitcoin with some changes and so on. And so we did that, and they had some users for a while. Now there's still users, and it doesn't cost us that much to keep it up. But like we wouldn't have added it today. And probably at some point, when they do another hard fork, then it's going to be like, okay, this is too much, and we're going to say sorry to the small number of users. But we do have users every day using Dash, for example. Again, not as many as Bitcoin.
Okay, I have the same question, but in different areas. Internal analytics, logs. Do you have like any like data that predicts like bull runs or tops of markets or bottoms of markets? Like you see a very high amount of people starting to spend. And related to that question is also, do you see users who kind of use your service almost to pay salaries or rent? Like there's some kind of automation or consistency to the frequency of them using your service, certain accounts, stuff like that?
Right. So, I mean, okay, second question first again. I mean, automation is usually symptomatic of something bad, and so on. And so if we do, we look into it, and if it is something bad, we don't, we make sure that it stops in whatever form. So we don't have that much automated type stuff, but there's definitely people that like spend a lot, like live on Bitrefill, like backpacker types, for example, that live in Airbnbs and so on, right? So there's quite a few of those that travel the world and work from their laptop and so on. In terms of like whether or not we have interesting statistics, so I mean we're not an exchange, but we're like equivalent to an exchange, but only sell side, right? And we're only low denomination things. So basically, when our volumes go up, that means that a lot of common folk are selling, usually, right? So that is a signal. And so, for example, if price goes up, usually like our volumes go up because a lot of people are selling because you get more money for your coins. But sometimes that's not the case, right? Since you could maybe say it as like, the people are hodling, okay, then it's going to go up more. So there's some stuff like that, but I don't think it's good enough to put into a trading strategy because there's too much outliers still. Like when there's fear. I mean, if there's big Tether FUD, then a lot of Tether users are going to spend their coins real fast. So our numbers will go up, for example. Yeah, or if there's fear about Bitcoin, it's going to crash, something, it's going to be 10,000 next week. A lot of people are going to sell, right? So yeah, there is some interesting stats, but it's hard, and when you slice it across the whole world, also it also makes it hard to see something happening in one particular country. Also, the price movements often are not just the product of many small guys, but actually a smaller number of big guys, and they don't spend a big chunk of their money at Bitrefill, so we wouldn't see them. But the on-chain is the same, by the way, right? I mean, like on-chain is interesting, but it never gives you the whole picture, because you don't know what is actually happening. That address A paid to address B and so on, but you don't actually know. And there's so many examples where sort of on-chain tells you a story that appears to be this, but it was actually something else entirely. And so I don't know. I mean, I also think it's interesting, but it's sort of interesting in a demographic survey, statistical, like on a high level, you get some directional insights, but like, I don't know. Maybe you know. Have you successfully traded the on-chain data? All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.